The silk cover slipped off, and sunlight exploded off the hood like a flashbulb. The applause was instant, loud, too perfect. There it stood, a brand new Mercedes S-Class, gleaming like a weapon. And under the hood ornament, a gold plaque that read Richard Hale, founder and visionary. My name. My legacy. A birthday gift from Ethan, my young business partner. And in that exact moment, I knew something wasn't right. This wasn't a gift. It was a message. Happy birthday, Richard, he said, grinning like a damn game show host. You earned it. The silk sheet came off with a dramatic flourish, revealing a midnight blue S-Class Mercedes, glinting like wet obsidian in the sun. My name was etched into a little gold plate beneath the hood ornament. Richard Hale, founder and visionary. I clapped him on the shoulder like a proud uncle. I gave the kind of chuckle older men use when they're trying to mask confusion. You serious? Dead serious, Ethan said. You've carried this company for 4 decades. Let someone else do something for you for a change. Around us, people clapped. Some even cheered. My assistant Melissa wiped a tear from her eye like we just landed on the moon. Champagne popped from somewhere behind me, and I didn't even register who poured the glass into my hand. My son, Michael, stepped forward through the crowd, raising his flute of Dom Perignon. To Ethan, he said, flashing that perfect politician's smile, for reminding us what generosity looks like. And to Dad, the only man I know who deserves a car that expensive and still thinks he doesn't. Laughter. More toasts. A few hands clapped me on the back. I nodded along. Took it all in. Smiled for the photos. But behind that smile, something inside me shifted, a soft click, the way a gear slips just before it jams. Ethan and I had been business partners for 3 years. He was younger, sharper with numbers than with people, and had a way of talking fast enough to convince most folks he knew what he was doing. I never disliked him, that's not the right word. But I never fully relaxed around him either. He was too polished. Too eager. And this? A car like that? A gift with more commas than I cared to think about. That wasn't a gesture. That was a statement. I slid into the driver's seat after the applause died down. Leather so soft it felt like skin. The console lit up like a spaceship. Ethan was leaning into the window, hands on the door frame, that same boyish grin on his face. She's all yours, he said. Custom-tuned, adaptive suspension, full autonomy package. Took a few calls to make sure it was delivered on time. I nodded, my hands gripping the wheel. That's a hell of a birthday present, Ethan. He patted the roof. Only the best for the man who built the empire. I drove it home that night, half expecting to find a bow in the trunk with my initials embroidered on it. The engine purred. The ride was smoother than anything I'd ever owned. But as I turned into the driveway, something in me resisted letting the car idle in front of my house. I parked it in the garage, covered it with a sheet, and took my old Buick the next morning. Call it paranoia. Or call it instinct. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. When Michael came by later that evening, bottle of scotch in one hand, thick steak in the other, we grilled in the backyard like we always had. He leaned back in my patio chair, looked up at the stars, and said, "You think Ethan's up to something?" I raised an eyebrow. "You tell me." Michael shrugged. "Just seems over the top. That car costs more than your lake house." "He's trying to impress people," I said, but my voice lacked conviction. "Maybe even trying to buy a little legacy for himself." Michael didn't press. He just nodded, sipping his scotch slow. "Just be careful, Dad. Trust is expensive in business. You taught me that." Later, when he left, I found myself staring at the covered car through the kitchen window, the way you might look at a stranger who just moved into the house next door. Something about it didn't feel like a gift. It felt like a hook. And I wasn't sure yet who was holding the line. They say when something feels off, you should listen. That gut feeling. It's not just paranoia, it's survival talking. I ignored mine. For a whole week, that damn car sat in my garage like a monument to a question I couldn't answer. Why would Ethan give me something that extravagant? But I drove it anyway. Not every day. Just twice. The first was a trip to the country club for a bored lunch. The second, a quiet Sunday drive up Ridgeview Highway, the kind of winding stretch with just enough sharp turns to remind you you're alive. That's where it happened. October had painted the hills in gold and fire, and I was easing into a curve I'd driven 100 times before. I wasn't speeding. I remember that detail clearly. The car handled like a dream, until it didn't. The moment I pressed the brake pedal, it was like stepping into silence. Nothing. No tension. No resistance. The world went slow. My hands gripped the wheel, and I felt the tires let go of the road. The car veered, fought me, and then spun. The last thing I saw before the airbags detonated was a blur of trees and the sickening tilt of sky where pavement should have been. Impact is loud in a way you don't hear, it's something you feel in your teeth, your spine. A scream of metal folding in on itself. A roar of glass bursting into dust. Then, silence. Heavy, eerie silence. I came to with the scent of smoke and gasoline in my nose and blood in my mouth. My left leg was twisted beneath the dashboard, my shoulder numb, a ringing in my ears that drowned out the rest of the world. But I was alive. Bruised, broken, but alive. The paramedics said it was a miracle. If you hadn't been in a car this solid, one of them muttered as they cut me out, you'd be pulp. But the thing that stuck in my mind wasn't the wreckage. It was the brake pedal. Or rather, the absence of one that worked. That memory looped in my head on repeat, louder than the sirens. At the hospital, they stitched me up and ran tests. Concussion. 2 cracked ribs. A sprained ankle. Minor internal bleeding. I was lucky, they said. Over and over again. Lucky. But as I lay there that night, the machines around me beeping like a digital lullaby, I didn't feel lucky. I felt hunted. My fingers kept twitching toward the call button, not because I was in pain, but because I needed to feel like I could still reach someone if I had to. Michael came the next morning. He walked into the room in a crisp navy blazer, no tie, but neat as ever. His expression folded into one of those perfectly pitched smiles, the kind that says, I'm worried, but not panicking. Jesus, Dad, he muttered, pulling a chair close. What the hell happened? I tried to sit up and winced. Brakes failed. Going 30. Lost control. His eyebrows pinched together. Just like that? I nodded. Just like that. Michael sat back, exhaled slow. They say the car's totaled. So I heard. He was quiet for a moment, then added, that's strange, isn't it? A brand new Mercedes? That doesn't just happen. I looked at him. Really looked. He wasn't being dramatic. There was no smirk, no raised eyebrow. Just concern. Sincere, or at least well-rehearsed enough to pass for it. Maybe it was a fluke, I said. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached for the little plastic pitcher on the tray beside me and poured me a cup of water, setting it gently within reach. Then he said, maybe. But you should still look into it. Into what? The car. The brakes. How a state-of-the-art safety system just failed. I studied his face, trying to find some angle. You think Ethan had something to do with it? Michael didn't blink. I think you should recover first. And then ask questions. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I was back in that car, careening toward the tree line, the world spinning sideways. But worse than the crash was the shadow that settled over me now, the creeping sense that someone wanted me gone. Not gone from the company. Gone. The car was towed to an impound lot for insurance inspection. I didn't say much to the adjuster on the phone, just nodded along as he rattled off damage reports and replacement values. But inside, a decision was taking root. I was going to find out why the brakes failed. And if someone did this to me, if someone tried to end my life and make it look like an accident, I would not rest until I found them. And burned everything they cared about to the ground. The first night home from the hospital, I didn't sleep. It wasn't the pain, though the fractured ribs throbbed every time I shifted in bed. It wasn't even the bruises or the ache in my leg. It was the silence. Thick, unnatural, like the house itself was holding its breath. I used to find peace in that silence. Linda and I built this home brick by brick, and after she passed, it became my fortress. But now every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind against the window, made my skin tighten. I was alive, but something inside me had shifted, some blind trust I'd carried all my life had cracked and gone brittle. By morning, I was in the kitchen, making a mess of scrambled eggs I could barely stomach. That's when I heard Michael's car pull into the driveway. He came through the back door like he'd been doing it his whole life, which he had, same confident stride, same slight frown he wore when he was thinking too hard. He looked like a man arriving on a mission. "Morning," he said, nodding toward the pan. "Smells like you're trying to poison yourself." "Better me than someone else," I muttered, tossing the eggs in the trash. He didn't laugh. Instead, he walked over, poured himself some coffee, and leaned against the counter. "You get any sleep?" "Not much." He took a sip. "Same." I raised an eyebrow. "Something bothering you?" He hesitated just a beat too long. "I've been thinking about the crash." "So have I." "And about Ethan." I turned to face him, resting my weight against the sink. "Say what you're really thinking, Michael." He sighed. "Dad, I don't trust him." That was new. Not that I didn't expect it, Michael had always been cautious, wary of people who moved too fast or smiled too wide. But he'd never said it out loud. I narrowed my eyes. "Since when?" "Since before the gift," he said. "I've seen the way he talks to clients behind your back. How he name-drops your legacy when it benefits him. And that car. It wasn't generosity. It was something else. A power move." I nodded slowly. "And you didn't say anything?" "You've been treating him like the second coming of Steve Jobs," Michael said. I figured I was being overly protective. "But after the crash." He trailed off. But I caught what he didn't say. After the crash, it felt like maybe I wasn't wrong. I didn't respond right away. My thoughts were spinning again, but slower this time, more deliberate. If Michael, of all people, was willing to voice doubts, it meant he'd been holding them for a while. "What do you think I should do?" I asked finally. He looked surprised by the question. "You're actually asking?" "I'm listening." He set his coffee down. "You don't need to confront him." "Not yet. But don't get comfortable. Don't treat him like a friend. He's a partner, and maybe not even that." I rubbed my jaw. "You think he's capable of trying to hurt me?" Michael didn't answer. He didn't have to. The way he looked at me, like he was holding back rage and fear in equal measure, was enough. He spent the rest of the morning helping me clean up the garage, shifting storage boxes I couldn't lift yet and organizing tools I hadn't used in months. It was quiet work, but the kind that feels grounding. I noticed how easily we fell back into old rhythms, father and son, working side by side, the way we used to before the company got too big and life got too loud. After lunch, we sat out on the porch. The sky was the color of cold steel, clouds low and heavy with rain. Michael stretched out his legs and looked at the horizon like it might offer answers. You know, he said, you always told me to watch what people do, not what they say. I did. Well. Ethan talks like he respects you. But what he does? That's a different story. I didn't argue. When he left that afternoon, I watched him pull out of the drive with a strange mix of gratitude and dread. Gratitude, because for the first time since the crash, I didn't feel entirely alone. Dread, because if Ethan had done what I suspected, I was standing at the edge of something far uglier than a business rivalry. Later that night, I found myself standing in the garage, staring at the mangled frame of the car. Insurance had towed it back that afternoon. The hood was crumpled. The windshield shattered. But I kept looking at the footwell, the space where the brake pedal had once been. It looked fine. Untouched. And yet, I knew. The feeling wouldn't go away. I walked back into the house and opened my laptop. My fingers hesitated over the keyboard before typing the words I'd been trying to avoid for days. Private vehicle forensic analysis. I found a specialist in the city. High-end. Discreet. I sent an inquiry, marked it urgent, and sat back. I didn't tell Michael. Not yet. Because part of me still wanted to believe this was all a terrible accident. But another part, the one that had been sharpened by 40 years of building an empire, was already preparing for war. 3 weeks after the crash, I walked back into my office for the first time. I thought I'd feel relief, or maybe a sense of control returning, but all I felt was the subtle shift of eyes. Polite smiles, cautious nods, a few stiff pats on the back from executives who'd never looked me in the eye before I landed in a hospital bed. They treated me like I was fragile now. Worse, like I was fading. And Ethan? He played the part of the concerned partner with such polished sincerity it almost fooled me. Almost. Welcome back, Richard, he said, stepping into my office with 2 lattes in hand, one of them already made just the way I liked it. We missed you around here. Place isn't the same without your growl echoing down the halls. I forced a smile. I'm sure you managed just fine without me. Barely, he said with a laugh, settling into the leather chair across from my desk. He looked fresh, tan, rested, like he'd just stepped off a yacht instead of a boardroom floor. His confidence had grown teeth in my absence, and now he bared them in smiles that didn't quite reach his eyes. I accepted the coffee but didn't take a sip. Ethan crossed his legs and gestured toward the stack of folders on my desk. I kept the big decisions on ice until you got back. Out of respect. Appreciate that. You're still the soul of this company, Richard. Don't think any of us forgot that. He said it like a compliment, but I heard the undertone. The soul, not the mind. Not the future. Something had shifted between us. Subtle. Quiet. But real. In meetings that week, I watched him closely. Every time he spoke, I studied the way others reacted, how easily they laughed at his jokes, how quickly they deferred to his suggestions. He'd filled the vacuum I left behind with charm and ambition. The staff adored him. Investors listened when he talked now. And me? I had become the legacy brand, the old logo they kept on the wall because it looked good, not because it meant anything. Michael noticed too. He didn't say it outright, but after one particularly grueling strategy session, he pulled me aside in the hallway. He's getting comfortable, Michael said, voice low. Too comfortable. He's earned some of it, I replied. He stepped up when I was out. Michael raised an eyebrow. You actually believe that? I didn't answer. Because belief wasn't the problem. It was trust. And trust, once cracked, doesn't heal right. I started keeping a notebook in my top drawer, a small leather-bound one. Every page held an observation. Nothing dramatic. Just details. Ethan's meetings that didn't show up on the calendar. The timing of his lunches with certain board members. Notes about his phrasing, his patterns. I began to piece together the shape of something I hadn't wanted to admit. This wasn't a man content with second in command. This was someone rehearsing for a hostile takeover. And yet, to anyone watching from the outside, we were still allies. Still the picture of cross-generational success. At a press conference for our new AI investment partnership, he stood next to me in front of the cameras, one hand on my back like we were old friends. I wouldn't be here without this man, he told the crowd, flashing his perfect grin. Richard Hale is the reason this company exists. The applause that followed was loud, but hollow in my ears. My gaze drifted over the audience, catching familiar faces, media reps, shareholders, influencers. All of them lapping it up, buying the narrative. But Michael, seated in the front row, wasn't clapping. He sat with his arms crossed, watching Ethan with a stare sharp enough to cut through stone. That night, over dinner at my house, Michael said what we'd both been dancing around for weeks. "Do you think he did it?" he asked. I knew what he meant. He didn't say, "the crash." He didn't say, "tried to kill you." He just left it there. Hanging. Heavy. I picked up my glass, stared into the dark swirl of bourbon. "I don't know." Michael leaned forward. "But you don't trust him." "No," I admitted. "I don't." He nodded slowly. "Then maybe it's time we started planning like he's the enemy." It was a line drawn in the sand, but he didn't say it with heat. There was no drama in his tone. Just clarity. And something deeper, protection. I remembered when he was 10, getting into a schoolyard fight because a classmate called me a failure after a bad earnings report. Even then, Michael had always been loyal to the idea of me, sometimes more than I deserved. "Let's not rush it," I said. "I've got someone looking at the wreckage." We wait. Michael didn't argue. He simply nodded and poured himself another drink. But I could see it in his eyes, the war had already started for him. And I wasn't sure I had the strength to fight on two fronts. Later, alone in my study, I opened the drawer and flipped through my notebook again. The pages were filling fast. What scared me wasn't just what Ethan might have done. It was how easily I had let him get close enough to try. You don't survive in business for 40 years without learning how to find answers without asking questions. And you damn sure don't survive an attempted murder by relying on gut feelings alone. So a few days after that staged press conference, I made the quietest, most important call of my life. Her name was Dana LeClaire. Former NTSB investigator, now a private consultant with a reputation for delivering quiet truths in high-stakes accidents, especially the kind people preferred to call unfortunate events. I found her through a contact in aerospace litigation. No website, no business cards, just a burner number and a very firm voice. "This isn't cheap," she said when I introduced myself. "I didn't ask for cheap," I replied. "I asked for quiet." A pause. "Send me everything," she said. "I'll handle the rest." I passed along the full insurance report, the photos of the wreckage, and, more importantly, the raw dashcam footage I'd installed myself when I first brought the car home. It had survived the crash. The insurance company didn't even know it existed. She called me 2 days later. "It's subtle," Dana said. "But the telemetry from the car shows a brake signal from the pedal that never reaches the control unit. Something's interrupting the communication between your foot and the system." "Like a hardware failure?" "No. Like someone introduced a relay bypass into the electronics. A delay circuit. There was brake input. It just never got through. And your car didn't alert you because the tamper happened below system diagnostics." I didn't speak. My jaw clenched so tight I heard a pop in my ear. "That's not a defect, Mr. Hale," Dana continued. "It's a ghost. Someone wanted this to look like a freak software glitch. But it wasn't random." "How sure are you?" 90%. "But I'm still testing." I'll need the full module pulled. Do it, I said. And Dana? Yeah. No reports to anyone. You report only to me. I hung up and sat still in my office, the blinds half closed against the morning glare. My chest tightened. I wasn't wrong. Something happened. Not just a crash, a decision. Someone tampered with my car. But knowing it happened wasn't the same as knowing who. That afternoon, Michael stopped by, unannounced as usual. He carried takeout and a six-pack of that obscure pale ale he liked, some quiet ritual he'd started after the crash. I didn't tell him about Dana. Not yet. We sat on the back patio, the air warm and brittle with late autumn. He passed me a bottle and leaned back in the chair. Still no answers, he asked. I shook my head. Just more noise. Michael watched the sky for a while, then said, "You know what keeps me up at night? Not whether Ethan did it. But whether he already thinks he got away with it." That hit harder than he knew. Because yes, Ethan was still smiling. Still sliding into meetings like he belonged in every room. He was already planning the next expansion round, already dropping phrases like next generation leadership into board memos. If he had done this, and that "if" was growing thinner by the day, he was betting I'd let it go. That I'd brush it off as a close call. That I'd fade. But I wasn't going anywhere. I started feeding small pieces of data to a trusted contact at an old security firm, nothing that would raise alarms. Just requests for background checks on Ethan's recent communications, his calendar logs, his past investors. No official channels. No legal footprints. This wasn't about making a case yet. This was about finding the chinks in his armor. I also started reviewing company access logs. Badge entries. Server logins. Conference call records. I built a timeline of Ethan's movements the week before my crash, down to the hour. And that's when something stood out. The day before the accident, Ethan spent 2 hours in the engineering annex, an area he had no reason to be in. It housed our tech development wing, including the lab we used to test connected vehicle prototypes. There was no calendar entry, no scheduled meeting. Just a swipe in. And 2 hours off the record. I confronted no one. I simply noted it in my black notebook, underlined it twice, and stared at the page for an hour. The following morning, I sat in the company's legal library, reading over asset protections and internal power structures like a man studying for an exam. I had built Hale Technologies on the promise that no one could ever dismantle it with a single betrayal. But I had also given Ethan too much access too quickly. His name was now on accounts that mattered. His signature could shake foundations if used in the wrong way. And I wasn't naive anymore. When I got home that night, Dana had left me a message. "Mr. Hale, the module confirms it. Your brake override system was intentionally bridged. Not just tampered with, designed to fail under specific conditions. I can put that in writing. But this wasn't an accident." I played that message 3 times before deleting it. Then I went upstairs, poured myself 2 inches of bourbon, and sat in Linda's old chair. I remembered her voice, how she used to warn me that trust in business should never feel easy. I hadn't listened. I let myself believe that a shared vision could substitute for caution. That a handshake and a smile could still mean something. But now I knew better. Someone tried to kill me. And tomorrow, I'd start planning how to kill his career, slowly, and publicly. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was afraid anymore, fear had burned itself out weeks ago, but because I finally knew what had to be done. For weeks, I'd told myself I wanted the truth. Now I had it. Dana's report, sitting on my desk, thick with technical details and unmistakable conclusions, confirmed everything I'd suspected. My brakes were tampered with. Intentionally. Carefully. And with expert precision. Someone wanted me dead. And I was done waiting. I began the next morning with a call to Whitmore Holdings, one of our most important investors. I didn't accuse, didn't tip my hand. I just scheduled a lunch. Ethan had brought them in during our Series D expansion, sold them on the dream of automated logistics and AI-enhanced vehicle fleets. But I'd built the foundation. I still had weight in the room. Enough to tilt things if I leaned in the right direction. At lunch, I planted the first seed. "We've been getting some pressure from certain internal voices," I said casually, slicing into a fillet. "Pushing expansion into areas we're not structurally ready for. I'm worried it's going to create instability." The investor, Barrett Whitmore himself, raised an eyebrow. "You're talking about Ethan?" I didn't answer directly. Just let the silence grow. "He's aggressive," Barrett said after a pause. "Young blood. But he gets results." I nodded. "Sometimes aggression isn't ambition. Sometimes it's recklessness dressed up in strategy." Barrett leaned back, studying me. "Are you pulling back?" "Let's just say I'm reevaluating how much control I've given away." That was all I needed to say. A small crack in Ethan's credibility, nothing more, for now. But in business, perception is erosion. Once you question someone's judgment, every decision they've made starts to look suspect. The next step was more precise. I called the legal department and asked for Ethan's recent contractual authority. Any new vendor approvals, discretionary budgets, off-book consulting arrangements. Nothing flagged on the surface, but there were irregularities. A handful of payments to boutique firms with vague deliverables. Market research, one said. Design optimization, another. I didn't accuse. I forwarded the reports to a third-party compliance analyst we'd used in a past audit and told them to dig. Quietly. Then I went to work on the board. I started making rounds. One-on-one coffees. Casual dinners. Phrases like sustainability, long-term stability, and protecting legacy peppered my conversations. I wasn't building a rebellion, I was preparing the soil. And meanwhile, I turned the screws. I pulled Ethan's access to the investor portal, quietly, under a security update pretense. I blocked a funding request he'd submitted for an upcoming startup partnership, citing strategic reevaluation. I removed his name from the quarterly keynote and inserted Michael instead. No explanations. Just a memo marked leadership messaging realignment. At first, Ethan didn't say a word. He kept smiling. Kept showing up to work in his tailored suits and handmade shoes, shaking hands, pitching ideas. But I watched the tension grow behind his eyes. The way his jaw tensed when I entered a room. The way his smile paused a half-second longer before appearing. And finally, he cracked. He stormed into my office late on a Friday, after hours, when the halls were quiet and the staff had vanished. He didn't knock. "You're undermining me," he said. I looked up from my desk, calm. "Am I? You pulled my speaking slot. You canceled the Edison deal. You cut me out of investor discussions. None of which require your authorization," I replied. "You're a partner, Ethan. Not the CEO." His eyes narrowed. "You brought me in to evolve this company. And now you're choking it. I brought you in to grow it. Not burn it down with ego." His nostrils flared. "What exactly is this? A power move?" "No," I said, leaning back. "It's a correction." He laughed. Bitter, sharp. "You think the board will stand behind you forever?" "I don't need forever. Just long enough." He stared at me for a moment. Then turned and walked out without another word. I sat there for a long while after he left. Not because I was rattled. But because I could feel it now, how close we were to the edge. Ethan was cracking. The pressure was working. But retaliation doesn't stop at boardrooms. So I pushed harder. Over the next 2 weeks, I fed the compliance analyst more documentation. I met with investors privately and steered conversations away from Ethan. I rewrote key internal reports, highlighting delays and failures on projects he'd overseen. Nothing false. Nothing exaggerated. Just curated truth. Ethan's name started dropping off lips in board meetings. People stopped quoting him in strategy sessions. I watched as his orbit shrank, bit by bit, until the shine wore off. And then came the moment I knew I'd turned the tide. We were in a quarterly review when one of the VPs, Cameron, a guy who used to practically genuflect in front of Ethan, interrupted him mid-pitch. With all due respect, Cameron said, "This feels rushed. Unvetted. Maybe we should run it past Richard first." Ethan's face froze. Just for a second. But I caught it. So did Michael. That night, over drinks at my house, Michael raised his glass and said, "You're doing it." Quietly. Relentlessly. "I'm not done yet," I said. He nodded. Good. But later, lying in bed, I couldn't sleep. Not because I felt guilt. But because the satisfaction was so sharp it scared me. I was dismantling Ethan's world, brick by brick. But revenge, once started, has a way of asking for more than you intended to give. It ended the way most downfalls do, not with a bang, but with exhaustion. Ethan walked into the boardroom that morning with his tie loosened, eyes bloodshot, and a new kind of silence trailing behind him. The kind that sticks. The kind that says everyone stopped listening. He sat across from me during the quarterly stakeholder review, shoulders drawn tight, a man trying to wear confidence like it still fit. But the fabric had shrunk. I didn't gloat. I didn't smirk. I just watched. My campaign hadn't required a single lie. I didn't manufacture anything. I simply exposed the messes he tried to sweep under polished wood floors. The investor calls he fudged. The budget overruns he buried. The prototypes that never left beta because the engineers never believed in them in the first place. I'd let the truth bleed slowly. Measured. Controlled. That morning, 3 directors abstained from voting on Ethan's product expansion proposal. 1, Carolyn Bender, who used to be his biggest cheerleader, voted against him outright. The motion failed. Ethan didn't argue. He didn't even look surprised. After the meeting, he avoided my gaze as he slipped out, his assistant trailing behind him like smoke. I stayed seated. Michael walked in from the side hallway, a coffee in each hand, like he knew exactly when to appear. He set one down in front of me. "It's done." I nodded. "Yeah." He sat across from me, blew on his cup, then said, "You ever feel bad about it?" I considered the question. Thought of the first board meeting Ethan had joined, how bright his ideas sounded back then. How hungry he'd been, how determined. I remembered the feeling in my gut when he handed me those keys, the Mercedes gleaming under a silk sheet like a reward, or a bribe. And I thought of the hospital. The smell of blood and sterile plastic. The weight of the steering wheel spinning useless under my hands. "No," I said. Michael chuckled. "Didn't think so. But I did feel something, though I didn't have a name for it yet. It wasn't regret. It wasn't joy. It was something like standing in the aftermath of a storm you saw coming and chose not to run from. We didn't talk about it again that day. Instead, we walked the floor together, checking in with departments, nodding to engineers and finance teams. There was a steadiness returning to the place, one I hadn't felt in months. Maybe years. Later that evening, Michael stayed for dinner. He grilled salmon while I chopped vegetables, the air filled with the scent of lemon and garlic and charcoal smoke. It felt almost normal. We ate on the patio. The trees rustled with a breeze that hinted at fall, and for once the sky didn't feel like it was pressing down on me. Michael raised his glass toward me. "To peace." I tapped mine against his. Temporary, but I'll take it. He grinned. You were brutal, you know. Was I? Ruthless. Precise. You dismantled that man's credibility piece by piece. I've never seen you that focused outside of a merger. I shrugged. Had to be done. Yeah. He paused. But I wonder if it's enough. I raised an eyebrow. Enough? Michael sipped his wine. You neutralized him. Great. But he's still out there. Still dangerous. You think he'll try something? I think men like Ethan don't go quietly. They wait. They regroup. I looked at him closely. And you think I should finish the job? Michael didn't answer right away. He just stared into the darkening yard, the shadows stretching long across the lawn. I think you should protect yourself, he said. And the company. Completely. The implication hung in the air between us. Prison. Lawsuits. Public exposure. I studied my son's face. The calm steadiness. The confidence. You've changed, I said quietly. Michael looked at me. What do you mean? You're sharper. Colder. He gave a small smile. You taught me well. No, I said. This isn't me. This is something else. Adaptation, he said. This is what survival looks like now. I didn't answer. I just stared down at my glass, the liquid catching the fading sunlight in deep amber swirls. That night, after he left, I sat at my desk in the study and opened the drawer. Dana's final report sat where I'd left it, untouched. Still sealed. Still heavy. I didn't open it. Not yet. I stared at it like it might vanish if I looked away long enough. But it didn't. It waited. Patient. Truth on paper. Truth that could end careers. Maybe lives. I ran my fingers across the envelope. I could give it to the board. To the police. I could destroy Ethan forever. But something in me hesitated. Because even now, after the wreckage, the betrayal, the unraveling, I wasn't sure if I had the right villain. And that scared me more than the crash ever did. The envelope sat on my desk for 12 days. Sealed. Unmoved. Heavy in the way a thing can be when it contains a truth you've already guessed but don't want confirmed. I told myself I needed time to think. That I had to be sure about what to do next. But in reality, I was scared. Not of Ethan, his fall had already begun, but of what might follow if I opened that envelope and acted on what I found inside. It was a strange kind of paralysis. The campaign to isolate Ethan had succeeded. He'd stopped showing up to the office entirely. The board received an official letter from his attorney requesting a restructuring of partnership terms. Polite language for backing out before the ship sinks. Michael said I'd won. So did everyone else. But the victory felt incomplete. I finally opened the envelope on a Sunday afternoon. Rain tapped against the study window in soft rhythms. A fire hissed low in the hearth. I was alone. Linda would have told me to open it days ago. She never tolerated limbo. I broke the seal with a letter opener and slid the document out with hands that had built empires and now trembled like a rookie on his first deal. It was worse than I expected. Dana had delivered a comprehensive forensic breakdown. Timelines. Voltage readings. ECU logs. Physical photographs of the brake module pulled from the wreckage. The report didn't just confirm tampering, it described it in clinical detail. Deliberate modification of the signal relay system. Installation of a microdelay circuit designed to sever response at high-speed turns. No manufacturer defect. No chance occurrence. A human decision. A methodical one. The final page crushed what little uncertainty I had left. Conclusion. Malicious interference with intent to cause high-speed failure. Probability of accidental failure, less than 0.1%. External sabotage confirmed. There it was. Proof. Cold. Irrefutable. And in my hands alone. I closed the file slowly. The room felt smaller now. I didn't call Dana. I didn't call the police. I didn't call Michael. I just sat there and stared out the rain-streaked window, watching water race down glass like everything I thought I knew was slipping away, frame by frame. Ethan had always been the obvious suspect. Young. Ambitious. Opportunistic. And he had motive, power, access, timing. But something about the timing still gnawed at me. Why crash the car after giving it to me publicly? Why do it so soon, so sloppily, when he was already rising within the company without bloodshed? And then there was Michael. Always at my side. Always 2 steps ahead. He never pushed his suspicions too hard, but he never let them go either. He was there the night I got home from the hospital, beer in hand, concern in his voice. He warned me about Ethan, gently, but persistently. He supported me through the retaliation, helped me reclaim control, helped me win. And yet, he never once asked to see the report. Never pressed. Never demanded answers. Because maybe, just maybe, he already knew. The thought was poison. And once it entered my bloodstream, I couldn't flush it out. Michael had everything to gain. If Ethan was out of the picture, there was no one else positioned to step up but him. No competition. No challengers. Just a son beside his father, guiding the company like it was his birthright. I pushed the report into the back of the drawer. Locked it. Sat back. When Michael called that evening, his voice was calm, smooth as aged scotch. "Dinner tomorrow?" he asked. "Celebration. You've earned it." I hesitated. "Sure. Why not?" "Great. Just us. No toasts, no pretense. Just a good meal." The call ended with a click that echoed louder than it should have. That night, I dreamt of the crash again. Only this time, I wasn't alone in the car. Michael was in the passenger seat. Calm. Watching me. Smiling. When I woke, my sheets were damp with sweat, my pulse thudding in my ears. I didn't sleep again. The next morning, I opened the drawer and stared at the report for a full 10 minutes before pulling it out, placing it in a new envelope, and slipping it into the inside pocket of my jacket. Just in case. I wasn't sure what I believed anymore. But I knew I couldn't sit in the dark with this truth any longer. I needed to look him in the eye. Maybe Ethan had done it. Maybe he was exactly what he appeared to be, a reckless opportunist who'd reached too far. Or maybe I'd destroyed the wrong man. And the real danger had been in my blood the entire time. I chose the place carefully. Not our usual steakhouse. Not the quiet Italian spot Michael and I favored. No wine lists, no white linen tablecloths. I wanted neutral ground. Somewhere neither sacred nor familiar. A corner booth in a dim, wood-paneled bar on the outskirts of downtown. Quiet enough for a private conversation. Anonymous enough that no one would remember seeing us there. And not us, for once. Just me and Ethan. I called him that morning. He didn't answer the first time. When he finally picked up, his voice was dull, stripped of its usual charm. "Richard. I need to talk," I said. "In person." A pause. "I don't think that's a good idea." "I'm not asking." Another pause. Then, "Where?" I gave him the address. "Be there at 6. Come alone." He arrived at 6 sharp. Still in one of those suits tailored within an inch of its life, but it hung looser now. His face looked drawn, thinner, like he'd stopped sleeping. The smile he offered as he slid into the booth wasn't the smile I knew. It wasn't even a mask. It was an empty reflex. "I assume this isn't a reconciliation dinner," he said, not meeting my eyes. "No," I said, pulling the envelope from my coat pocket. "This is something else." I slid it across the table. He looked at it but didn't touch it. "What is it?" "Proof." He didn't ask of what. That was telling. When he finally opened it, he did so slowly, like he already knew what waited inside. He read in silence, his lips moving slightly as he scanned the report. 3 pages in, his fingers trembled. At page 5, he looked up. "Jesus Christ," he whispered. "Now you know what I know." He set the pages down gently, hands flat against the table like he was bracing himself against a fall. "You think I did this?" he asked. "I know someone did." He blinked. "But you think it was me?" I didn't answer. "Richard." He leaned forward, eyes wide now. "I swear to you, I had nothing to do with this. I would never try to hurt you. I'm not suicidal. You had motive. You had access. And you knew when I'd be driving that car. I gave it to you at a public event," he snapped, frustration cracking through his voice. "You think I planned an assassination in front of cameras? Maybe you wanted it to look like a malfunction." "No," he said, almost pleading now. "You've got it wrong. Convince me." He shook his head. "That report doesn't prove I touched the car. It proves someone tampered with it. But not who." "Then who did?" I asked, my voice low, controlled. "Who had the skill? The timing? Who benefited the most from your fall?" Ethan went silent. Too silent. His eyes searched mine, desperate, panicked, as if words were caught in his throat. "You're not saying it," I said. "Say it." He looked down. "You think it was Michael?" I didn't answer. But I didn't deny it either. He leaned back, suddenly quiet. "That's why you've been so cold. Why you didn't go to the police. You're not sure. You're stuck between 2 men, both close to you, both with motive." "I'm not stuck," I said. "I'm hunting." He nodded slowly. "Then you should know something. A week before the crash, I saw Michael in the engineering annex. Talking to Victor from R&D. What about?" "Didn't hear. But afterward, Victor submitted a requisition for a parts order we never authorized, circuitry, micro-relays. Stuff we don't use anymore." "Why didn't you report that?" "Because it didn't seem like anything at the time," he said. "And because I didn't want to start a war with your son." I stared at him, heart pounding. "If this was Michael," Ethan said carefully, "he played us both. Got me to hand you the gift. Let me take the fall. And waited until you tore me apart before stepping in to be your savior. You expect me to believe you had nothing to do with it?" He exhaled. "I expect you to believe what you want. But I swear on my life, I'm not your enemy." I studied him. The fear in his voice wasn't the fear of guilt. It was the fear of a man caught in a story he didn't write. He stood slowly, the report still sitting between us. "I'm leaving the city," he said. "No one will touch me now. Not after what you did." I stayed seated. Didn't look away. "You're lucky I don't hand this to the police tomorrow," I said. "I am," he replied. "But not for the reason you think." Then he turned and walked out. I watched him disappear through the rain-streaked window. He looked broken. Not defeated, broken. Like a man who'd been crushed by something far colder than justice. I sat there for another half hour, the report still in front of me. Michael had always been by my side. Patient. Supportive. Calculated. And he knew everything, except this. Except that the brakes were sabotaged. Unless, he did know. Unless he'd never needed to be told. The thought clung to me like oil. I paid the tab and left, the envelope pressed to my chest like a secret I didn't know how to carry anymore. Tomorrow, I would dine with my son. And this time, I'd listen to everything he didn't say. The restaurant Michael chose was too perfect. Not extravagant, not flashy, refined in a way that suggested taste over ego. A quiet place for a private meal between father and son. I knew the moment I stepped through the doors that this wasn't just a dinner. It was a curtain call. He was already seated when I arrived, a bottle of Bordeaux open on the table, 2 glasses half filled. He rose to greet me with a warm smile, then gestured for me to sit. To us, he said, raising his glass. I clinked mine lightly against his. To surviving. He laughed, and for a while, the conversation drifted. He asked about my recovery. Told me the board had voted to reinstate full executive authority to my office. Talked about the future, about his ideas for a revised expansion strategy. But I didn't hear most of it. I was waiting for the moment. It came between courses. He took a sip of wine and said, "Ethan's out. You've got nothing left to worry about." I met his gaze. Calm. Direct. "I got the report last week." He paused, just slightly. I continued. It confirmed what I already knew. The car was sabotaged. Deliberately. Someone installed a delay circuit in the braking system, meant to fail at high speed. Michael leaned back slowly. His glass hung in the air. "And you're sure it was Ethan?" "I am." He didn't react. Not visibly. No shift in expression, no burst of denial. Just a long, thoughtful silence. "I never liked him," he said eventually. "Too charming. Too ambitious." "That's not enough to prove motive," I said, watching his face. "But the parts he ordered. The timing. The meetings in the engineering annex. The internal access logs. It all fits." He nodded slowly. "Then I guess justice was served." "Was it?" He looked at me. "You don't think so?" "I think I destroyed a man," I said. "And I think it came too easy." Michael took another sip of wine. He made himself the enemy. He also gave me the keys to the car in front of 100 people. Publicity stunt. Or cover, I countered. He didn't flinch. The waiter cleared our plates and offered dessert. We declined. The tension at the table had grown too thick for sweetness. "I'm glad you're okay," Michael said finally. "You mean that?" He looked up, eyes suddenly steady. "Of course." I studied him, trying to find the edge where concern ended and calculation began. But Michael was a master of ambiguity. He had grown into it like a second skin. When we stood to leave, he walked slightly ahead of me, slipping his coat on with practiced ease. As we stepped out into the night, he turned and clapped a hand gently on my shoulder. "Don't worry, Dad," he said with a small grin. "From now on, your braking systems will always be in perfect order." I stopped walking. He didn't notice, or pretended not to. He kept moving toward the curb, waving for the valet like it was any other night. But I stood there, frozen. He shouldn't have known about the brakes. No one should have known. I'd told no one, not even him. Dana's report had stayed sealed until I opened it in my study. I hadn't mentioned how the crash happened. Not once. Yet he knew. Not just that it was sabotage. Not just that Ethan was the target. He knew how. The method. The detail buried in the last 3 paragraphs of a confidential forensic report. The blood in my ears roared. He turned back once, waving as his SUV pulled up. "Talk tomorrow?" I nodded. Mechanical. Numb. He drove off into the night like nothing had happened. Like he hadn't just confirmed the one thing I'd refused to believe. That I had destroyed the wrong man. That I'd been used. That the hand I'd trusted most had been guiding me from behind the scenes, steering me toward revenge, away from the truth. And I followed. Willingly. Blindly. When I got home, I stood in my study for a long time, the fire dying behind me, the report still in the drawer where I'd hidden it. Useless now. The truth was no longer in the pages, it was in what hadn't been said. In the silence over dinner. In that one casual line delivered like a punch to the chest. Your braking systems will always be in perfect order. That wasn't reassurance. That was ownership. And I finally understood what kind of man my son had become. The scariest kind. The kind who doesn't get blood on his hands, not because he fears guilt, but because he doesn't need to. Because he's smart enough to let others do the cutting for him. I poured myself a drink. Sat in the dark. And wondered whether I'd built a legacy. Or raised a monster.